Hello, my dear friends. How are you? Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Mari Thurger, and here I am to briefly answer a question that pops up from time to time, especially from the part of my patrons, if there was some sort of a priestly class or priesthood among the Vikings, or better still, in Old Norse society. A priesthood that held some religious devotion and performance concerning the pre-Christian pagan belief systems. And this question is often asked because people are in doubt concerning the authenticity of those they come about who claim to be priests and priestesses of the Old Norse religion. And if you want to become one or to be initiated into the religion, you have to pay for the course, and they will teach you all about it and initiate you into it, and you might also become a priestess of the Old Norse religion because, according to such people, they have preserved the knowledge and they truly do things as it was originally. Rest assured, every one of these people that claims such things, their entire performance is New Age. It's something that has been recently developed and has absolutely nothing to do with how things were religiously and spiritually conducted in the past for such a cultural and traditional background of late Iron Age and early medieval Scandinavia. This doesn't mean that what such people are doing isn't or is religiously right or wrong, or that they should or shouldn't do this, because people are free to conduct their spiritualities in whichever way they deem to be the best way to express themselves. This only means that their claims are false in the sense of preserving the old ways, and that such performances are according to the pre-Christian Nordic priesthood and whatnot. If you enroll in one of these courses, that's up to you, but be certain that what you are getting yourself into is something that has been developed quite recently. And to put things into perspective, 90% of the content of these courses and what you shall learn was developed in these past 2 decades. So everyone that is watching this video as of the moment I have submitted it, you were all already born when the great majority of the content of these courses into Old Norse religion and priesthood were developed. I repeat, everyone is free or should be free to religiously and or spiritually express themselves in whichever way they want and deem to be the best for them. And everyone is also free to enroll and participate in these things. However, what we are dealing with here right now are the things people claim to teach and claim to know. And this actually reminds me of a YouTuber I've seen quite recently, where she claims to know and to hold the original knowledge of the Sami people, as she herself is of Sami origins, whatever. Which shows that this is a person that either never talked to an actual Sami person, or she just claims these things in order to pass on this legitimacy because, well, it is exotic, it feels special, and this calls upon people, right? And, well, she's trying to sell something, obviously. I mean, no problem in trying to sell something, as we are all trying to survive, right? Just don't lie to people, and that's just it. And it is my view that this is highly disrespectful towards the Sami, because unlike the people who lived in Old Norse society, the Sami are actually still very much alive as an ethnic indigenous group, and their culture and traditions have been repressed for so many centuries that not even they themselves, even among the elders, they don't know about their own religious and cultural heritage, and it has actually been a struggle to try to recover such traditions in these past 2 decades at least. So much so that the Sami in this 21st century, in their struggle to reclaim their cultural heritage, had to resort to core shamanism, a new age spiritual expression, in order to have a starting point to try to recover their old traditions, because much of the knowledge and sources on those aspects have been utterly lost. Even among scholars who have dedicated their work to the study on Sami mythology, belief systems, religions and traditions, and so on and so forth, have been able to recover only a tiny fraction of what old Sami traditions and belief systems might have been. So, to claim to know the original ways of the Sami and of the Old Norse as well, as such a YouTuber has claimed, and other YouTubers I've seen, well, maybe it was revealed to her in a dream, who knows? If so, it's mighty strange such revelations are so in line with the New Age spiritualities and propaganda. Anyway, sell whatever you want, obviously. There's always someone that appreciates what we have to give, what we have to offer. Believe in whatever you want, as all religions, all spiritualities at some point started off as personal gnosis. Religious freedom also should be a given. However, people deserve to know the truth. Now, speaking of my patrons and selling something, I remind you that if you want to help me carry on with the work I've been developing here at YouTube, consider becoming my patron. I mean, obviously, your help and support is very much appreciated. Thank you for your kindness. Now, let's delve into it, if you please. So, was there a priesthood among the Vikings? What do experts think about the priests and priestesses of Norse paganism? Figures actually present in written sources during the Christian medieval period. The study of beliefs in the Viking Age is one of the most problematic in the study of Scandinavian history, Nordic history as a whole. And some of them are the uses of concepts and terminologies. For example, what should these beliefs be called? Since an article written back in 2012, and I'll put it on the screen, academics have used the term paganism less and less to describe these old belief systems related to pre-Christian Scandinavia, preferring Old Norse religion, which in turn, since another work from back in 2020, has been pluralized to further encompass regional and social differences in worship and rite. If by any chances you haven't watched a previous video I've made on Old Norse religion, religious practice in Nordic paganism, I suggest you watch that video for further information on this theme and what we truly know about it so far, taking into consideration archaeological evidences as well. Now, the descriptions of Norse paganism come essentially from sources written during the Christian medieval period and are clearly homogenizing, creating a reference that polytheistic practices were institutionalized and organized with dogmas and priestly structures and temples, which isn't true, not in all cases, obviously. So this comes from the Christian perspective, transporting what they knew of their own religious structures into the pagan realities they were witness of. It is also important to mention that the great majority of these Christian written sources into pagan beliefs of Nordic societies are not first-hand accounts, were not witnessed first-hand, but Christians writing about the descriptions made by saints and long-dead missionaries. Archaeologists, in turn, have avoided the term temple, preferring cult buildings or structures, or preserving Amic terms such as hoof. We see the term hoof in some places across Iceland, reporting back to a place where a religious practice towards pagan beliefs were held. The term hoof sometimes is translated as temple, indeed, surely, but such places weren't always temples. In fact, for the case of Iceland, pagan temples were rare. So, to avoid misconceptions or misunderstandings, the best thing is to not translate it at all and use the term hoof, just hoof, as the general term of a place of religious practice towards remaining pagan beliefs in Iceland. But what about the priests described in Christian sources? So researchers have been using the term cult specialists and religious leaders as conceptual substitutes with the aim of avoiding Christian filtering. And I know, calm down, some people don't really like the term cult, and as said here before, it's not surprising that the great majority of such people are from the US, from the United States, as the perspective on cult, understandably, is quite different than what we mean as cult in academic research concerning pagan religious performances. What in the US is often understood as a cult, we here in Europe, as an example, we would call it a sect and not a cult. Now, in academic terms, for example, referring to Old Norse forms of religious and or spiritual expressions, we call a cult in the sense of presenting a ritual and other performances that are not governed by a religious organism or supervised by a religious figure that serves as the authority of the religion, but something a lot more under the parameters of a free religious expression without following stipulated religious canons or following an agreed upon religious dogmatic conduct. Now, I'll show you an image here on the screen. We can see the reconstruction of the Upokra cult building illustrated by Louis Lequerue. The height, shape, roof details and sculptural figures of this site are hypothetical, based on Norwegian churches from the 11th century of the Common Era, which would have been inspired by pagan temples previously erected in the same location. The second image shows two of the four central pillars of the building in section, and the human figures serve as visual scale. It's important to mention that there are two Icelandic written sources describing the pagan temples, which I've talked about on the previously mentioned video, one source having been written in the 13th century and another in the 15th century, which is a copy of the letter, of the description in the earliest account, and of the former, sorry, not the letter. But anyway, these were descriptions of Christians imagining how the pagan temples would have been based on what they know about the configuration of their contemporary Christian churches. The only oldest source that may give us some glimpses into an actual Nordic pagan temple come from the descriptions of Adam of Bremen, here spoken many times before, dating to the second half of the 11th century, where he describes a temple in the Swedish capital of Gamla Uppsala, Old Uppsala, fairly late in the Viking Age. There isn't much to go about it, and unfortunately archaeologists have not yet found such a temple, but other temples have been found, or rather cult buildings or structures, because we do not know how such religious expressions were conducted in such structures and how exactly were they performed or held, or how ceremonies and rituals were performed or held, and what such structures contained, because a temple has some, let's say, prerequisites in order to be considered a temple. We return to the Amic term hoof, which encompasses a broader approach to religious expressions as a place of religious expression that doesn't have to necessarily be a temple. And there may have been cult leaders who were responsible for ritual functions at specific shrines, as well as organizing public sacrificial feasts, but it is not known whether they were permanently employed in these places. Their role was probably sporadic and occasional. There is no source whatsoever that supports the assumption that cult leaders were a closed or hierarchical organization, a priesthood, if you will, with special dogmas, particular theology, or ritual practices for a broad group of people. Anyway, religious leadership practices were likely inherited within certain families, who in turn cared for religious traditions in specific locations, on their farms, and occasionally in community shrines. A good example is probably the Alfablot celebration. I have a more recent video about it. Please check that one if you can, obviously. There also appears to have been various other types of religious specialists to perform prophecies and magical activities or services. These specialists could make a living by performing rituals, that is, religious practice was their profession, speaking of Seidkona, Seidmadre, Vulva, etc., not actually being religious or cult leaders or belonging to a religious order or group, but practitioners of magic, divination, and prophecy, many of them being itinerant and earning a living providing these services to the communities. More or less much like what we see nowadays with tarot readings, rune casting, people selling some form of service, modern witches, etc. Although, obviously, the implications of past people such as the Seidkona, Seidmadre, Vulva, and so on and so forth in late Iron Age and medieval Nordic societies, well, it makes things a little bit more complex, as it was something a lot more related to a semi-shamanic performance, right? Which was mostly for divinatory purposes, but involved rituals and certain performances of which it is complex to determine, but through terms such as Vardlokur, we do get the perception that it was something a lot more shamanic in nature, for a lack of a better term, according to religious traditional aspects of circumpolar cultures and ethnic groups, performances towards spirits as aiding entities, tutelary entities, and aiding in divinatory efforts. Another aspect that has attracted considerable recent research is the role of kings with the topography of the sacred and power in pre-Christian beliefs, in which the main political leaders of a region also controlled the religious sphere. The ideology of a divine descent of rulers in Scandinavia is very old, quite old, dating back at least to the migration period, but it obviously took new and decisive transformations with Christianization. So we are basically talking about nobility, royalty, holding the religious power and performing public rituals and ceremonies to the people they governed, and this religious power was hereditary according to their social position as having the right to hold and perform the religious aspects because of the belief in their ancestry being directly originated from the divine itself, from the gods. Some priestly figures that were represented in medieval Norse literature incorporate Christian experiences projected in a discourse on the figure of the other, the pagan. And this trend continued with post-medieval reception, as in 19th century Romanticism, which mixed the Celtic Druid with the Gothi, or contemporary audiovisual media, which represented these pagan priests with a sinister and diabolical character. So, the priests of Nordic paganism from the medieval to modern times embody stereotypes, idealizations, and fantasies about the non-Christian person. And this is mostly what we have today. I feel like today I woke up to get on some people's nerves and then I'm off to sleep, but it is what it is. People have the right to know the truth. I mean, the truth as we know it so far, or rather, people have the right to be aware of the facts that lead us closer to the truth. And the truth is sometimes, quite often, well, is either boring or terrible. Enroll in whichever course to become a priest or priestess of whatever new age spiritual performance people are selling, no problem, no shame. Just be aware of what people are claiming to give and claiming to know and claiming to be, because that tells quite a lot about the intentions of those people and also their character. As someone once said, I don't remember, but it was something like, the truth belongs to no one, but to those who can comprehend it. Philosophy. You know, whatever. My dear friends, I do hope you have enjoyed today's video. I do hope it was useful. Just because we lost much of the knowledge on how things were performed and conducted in old forms of paganism, that doesn't mean we cannot express ourselves in the ways we understand to be the most appealing and most productive in our own spiritual development. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, tack för idag. Thanks for today. Obrigado por hoje. Until we meet again, my dear friends.